Thank you. Actually, it's my husband's family, and it's their family business. They have an injection moulding business here in Richmond. So the plastics I do know a lot about, because I worked for them at one point, and that's a whole other story. The plastics I do know about aren't really used for fountain pens. So what does it mean to be plastic? We'll start off with a definition. So we have some Greek people who could probably read that Greek.
Plastikos, and I'm not even Greek.
Who wants to actually pronounce it correctly?
Well, classical pronunciation or modern?
I'll leave it up to you.
Plastikos in classical Greek.
Plastiko. We don't say the S.
I'm doing classical.
Plastico. So it means, as you know, it's capable of being shaped or moulded, and we actually overuse the word plastic, and we sometimes forget that it has this meaning of being shaped, moulded, malleable, and we use it. You might hear it in neuroplasticity, and you obviously hear it because we talk about plastics every day. They're literally part of us. So what is plastic? It is a semi-synthetic or synthetic material. I don't know anything about the chemical side of it, so if there's any chemical engineers here, feel free to jump in. Basically, you take oil or cornstarch or salt or cellulose and you heat it up and do some chemical stuff to it, and then you find its single, monomers, single chain, mix them together and you've got polymers, and that makes plastic. And that's my extent of my knowledge on how plastic is made. Like I said, anyone else want to speak up?
You're pretty close. It's long chain monomers, long chain molecules joined together.
Yeah, that's nice to know. So how do you use the plastic that we're going to use? And mostly the way we use plastic is we melt it and mold it. And there's a bunch of different molding processes. And what I'm going to show in this video, if it wants to work, is basically, this is my husband's factory. And you can't tell, but that's a 2-ton crate there of plastic. And there is no sound, thankfully, because it's very loud. And this is the plastic, if you guys want to pass it around. And there's a huge hopper. I'll show that, run that again. It's only a short video. There's a huge hopper at the top of, so he does injection molding, huge hopper. That's a small machine, by the way. That's not a big machine. Huge hopper at the top, and what I'm showing you here in the picture is the hopper with the plastic in the window, okay? So just showing you that that's what it looks like. There's a vacuum that sucks it all up, and it molds whatever you want it to mold. I obviously can't talk about what he molds because they one-of-a-kind thing in Australia, and lots of people want to know what they do and how they do it. So I can't talk much about what he does, but I can talk about plastics in general. I know there are some people here who know a lot more about these early plastics than I do. So if I say something wrong, feel free to correct me. So celluloid, 1850s, invented by a guy named Alexander Parks. It is, some people say it is wood pulp and cotton. Some people say it's just cotton. But basically these natural products are treated with nitric acid to loosen the structure, and camphor is used as the plasticizer. So that's the product that actually turns it into plastic. And by the 1890s, it was treated with sulfuric acid, which made it harder because it was too soft to really do anything with it. It was kind of cool to have, but not really good to use to actually mold things out of. It was kind of used as a binder. By about the 1920s, celluloid had been worked with long enough to start understanding that it could be produced in sheets, in big sort of flat sheets, and that could be cut and used for various purposes. So unlike modern plastics, which are injection molded or extruded or blow molded, this was kind of made, if you can imagine, from all the descriptions I've read, kind of in like a big flat tray. And basically you were an artist who moved around the tray creating the patterns and the colour and the form, and you would put different dye lots and things in it, and then it would harden and you could cut it, and then it could be lathe turned. So it takes about 20 days to cure. That's the sort of average I came to in all the research, bearing in mind I have no books on celluloid, but this is what I could find. One of the things I did find out was that Schaefer adopted celluloid really early, and that you probably know that, and in like really early. So 1924, they started with the balance, and then in the 30s had the flat top, and they had really desirable sort of colour schemes. So I think there's a flat top up there, there's another Schaefer there. So they had some really nice colours, really vibrant colours. And then obviously Parker followed, and I think we know what those Parkers look like. I think most people have one. So mine's not a very good example. Mine's a bit faded and old looking, but there you go, that's stacked celluloid. And the concept of stacked celluloid is that they would have cut it, lathed it circular, and then trimmed it again into circles, and then stacked them in more celluloid, and then again waited for that to cure, and then cut it again, and then you've got your celluloid stack. So it's quite a process. I don't know much about the value of celluloid. I don't know much about whether celluloid pens from 100 years ago would still be viable to use. Some people are nodding. Good, wonderful. I do know that celluloid is still a plastic that people love to use, and it was made up until like the 2010s. There was still a production of it right into the 2010s. Or the 2000s, I think. So people were still making it. And it was a real artist product. So you had to be an artist to understand how it moved and flowed to get the layers, which I think is quite beautiful. So why celluloid fell out of favour? Where do we start? Who knows?
It's flammable.
It's flammable, obviously. It's very, very flammable. There's no UV stability, warping, solvent issues, tons of issues. But if you still look after your pens, it can go and go and go.
So Desi, with celluloid as well, when they pressed it out and extruded it out into sheets, they could actually, instead of drilling it in a lathe or that, they'd get some of them sheets so thin they could curve
Laminate it, yeah.
and effectively use ultrasonic welding to connect the two layers together, and that's how your Pelican M800s are made today still. Some Parkers do it in the war.
Yes, there's a couple of different ways that Pelicans are made, and I'll talk about that.
And the reason they did that was it was a quicker manufacturing process.
Yes.
Less chemical requirements because you could use ultrasonic welding instead, or heat, and you still get the same properties, and it was a low pressure material.
Thank you. Anyone want to guess how much this costs? How much plastic do you think this would be worth? Sorry?
Is it ABS or cocaine?
So it's PP stands for polypropylene, yeah. So what do you reckon polypropylene about this much is worth? How much? Yeah, about right. My husband said it's like 0.03 cents worth of 0.03 cents. So polypropylene is really cheap, and that's why we have so much polypropylene stuff around. I mean, you can't actually turn it into pens. I mean, you can, but not very good ones. So casein is my next early plastic, and it's a bioplastic again. 1890s is when it was invented, and it was invented by Adolf Spittler and Wilhelm Krusche. I think I'm pronouncing that. Who's German? Who knows how to pronounce those surnames? I don't. No, okay. Together they discovered, I don't even know why you would want to do this, but they added formaldehyde to milk protein. Like, what were you doing with that? But anyway. Well, yeah, but I mean, why would they think to do that? That was the first thing that sort of went through my mind, is like, what were they doing? Were they trying to create long life milk, or what was going on with that? But anyhow.
Trying to make a baker-like substitute.
They were trying to make something that replicated horn, or those precious sort of products that were in high demand but high cost and also quite rare. Horn was probably the big one, and tusk. They were trying to replicate that. I don't know how they figured out to add those two things together, but I guess they were just mixing up whatever they could. I like that they have this word galalith, which is sometimes still around, and it translates to milk plastic. I thought that was really interesting. And then there's other sort of names, and these I believe were brand names for products that were mostly sold in the US that didn't really align with fountain pens. So I know Aeronoid was actually the brand name of a set of furniture handles, and they're very nice looking furniture handles. So that was one thing that I noticed. They had Aladdinite, Carolith, Ivorine, and Lactoid. Lactoid is a weird one, which were trade names for lots of things. So Conway Stewart used casein a lot. I'm pretty sure that's a casein pen. I don't know if it is, but I'm pretty sure that one is. I'm seeing nodding. Pretty sure that one is. That one actually was up on eBay, and I was watching it, but they never showed a picture of the nib, so I decided not to spend a lot of money on this pen. But it's very pretty. It's a pen and pencil set. This one here is a modern Conway Stewart. That was a 2005 special edition, Queen Elizabeth something. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And Conway Stewart was actually making casein in their factory until they decided to sell it off, I think. Sell that line of their factory off, or even close it down. They went broke. Yep.
Today's Conway Stewart's not Conway Stewart.
No, I know.
Version of
Bit like Esterbrook's not really Esterbrook either. Yeah, there's a few of that. So again, why is it not, I mean, casein is popular with us. We like the way it looks, but why is it not popular with manufacturers? It's because it cracks, it crazes, it splits, it doesn't like water, which is a bit silly when you're trying to fill it with ink.
It's water soluble or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it dissolves in water. I was reading Reddit about a year ago, and someone had decided that they needed to clean their vintage fountain pen made out of casein, and they soaked it, and it was never going back to the way it looked. And someone else helpfully suggested, well, maybe you should just soak it a bit more and swell the whole pen. I was like, oh, no thanks. That was an interesting comment.
If I could discontinue theirs because it was absorbing the colour of the ink.
Yeah.
The beautiful blue pen will turn black, or the black pen turn blue, and
Gorgeous, gorgeous product, but for looking and not using. Yeah. Cellulose acetate is sort of more like a 1950s. I think it was invented about 1920s, but it didn't sort of come into play until the 1950s with fountain pens. It was a sort of a stable answer to celluloid, and it mimicked its qualities. Again, it was treated with acetic acid, and then it was treated with sulfuric acid to harden it. So acetic acid created the slush, I guess the muck, and then the sulfuric acid hardened the muck. So whilst they're derived from plant materials, there are some serious chemicals in it. It's a primary design of the Pelican 400, and then later the 82 to today, those Suveron pens. And they are here. I've got a bunch of them actually. So if you don't have a Pelican or haven't seen what a Pelican looks like, I've got a couple of 400s to go around that use that skill. These are modern. They're not. I don't have a 400. I've seen a lot I want to buy, but I don't have the kind of money for it yet.
So what is the plastic being made?
So the stripes are made with the acetate, and then they're probably, I would say, they're covered in a more modern plastic, since these are modern. So you can see up there, that's the classic 800 there that was being spoken about before, but also it could be used exactly the way you said to wrap and create an entire pen body, which is how that tortoiseshell one was made and probably how that jade one was made. If you do decide to download this particular presentation, I've got all the sources and the links and everything. There is one Japanese fountain pen brand that only makes their pens out of celluloid acetate or cellulose acetate, and that's Onishi. I'm going to spell this. Seizakusho, I think that's how you pronounce it. And they do some really beautiful pens. That's one of theirs up there, the tortoiseshell one. And Platinum have a special edition Century fountain pen made entirely from cellulose acetate, and that's the jade one there. So Japanese makers seem to really like this material and they use it a lot, but again, most of us will be familiar with Pelican using theirs. Okay, that's about where I'm going to end it for the sort of vintage plastics, and we're going to talk about the modern plastics. And what I've got up there is the codes for most of the plastics that we see today. So you've got, it used to be called PET, P-E-T, but now it's PEAT. HDPE, PVC, LDPE, PP, which is polyprop, PS, which is polystyrene, and other. And you know what? Most of the fountain pen plastics are in other. And other is a pretty broad category. So we're going to talk about the other plastics and the modern plastics. And this is where it gets pretty interesting, because a lot of people have pretty big feelings about plastic pens and why are some of these plastic pens worth so much more than other plastic pens. I'm not here to make that decision for you or to explain it. I'm just here to say that this is the plastic that's used, and this is perhaps an idea of why some things are used. This is not my pen. Whose pen is that? I was like, I will take it, but it's not mine. I'm going to just walk this back to you. There you go. Thank you. I know, I would have just taken that. So this is where I talk about the two different forms of making modern pens. Modern pens are quite complex. You need extruded plastics, and we see extruded plastics on the insides of our pens. Actually, these are all pistons. They're not going to have anything. Let's find one. One of these. Is that a piston? No. I know this. So what we want is, we want, these aren't inked. Good. Okay. So, most of you are familiar with that, right? This bit here is extruded. It's extruded in a long, thin tube, and the machine will cut it down to size. This bit here, this too is extruded. You can usually tell because extrusions leave a belly button and injection molding leaves a nipple. So that's how you can tell usually. And these two things would have been extruded at different times on different machines, and then you would have had someone pop them together to actually get them to work. Sometimes, this is the thing with plastics, you have to have one of these hot, because when plastic's hot it expands, and when it's cold it shrinks. So sometimes you'll have an extruded piece that's coming off a machine, and then you'll have a box of these other bits sitting next to the machine attendant, and they will be pushing them together to make sure that they fit and they're tensioned. This one has a metal ring about it, so perhaps that's the way that it's combined. Yeah, maybe that's the way it's screwed together. But some of them I know are pushed in. So with injection molding, you get your caps and your barrel sections for feeds. You may get extruded feeds, but I think that's pretty rare these days. So what you're looking at that would come out of an injection mold is that bit, obviously this bit, and most of our caps have a nice finial on them, so you won't be able to see the little nipple bit that says it's come out of the machine, and then obviously that bit. And you know, some of these things will all be injection molded differently. So if you can imagine, there would need to be a mold for this section, a mold for that section, and perhaps two molds for that section. And just to bear in mind, one of my husband's molds to produce just one product that they produce is up of $250,000. So these molds to make the fountain pens aren't cheap, so to speak. And what I'm going to show you is, hopefully if I can get this video to work, is actually the injection molding machine working.
Is there a lot of pressure in it?
Absolutely.
Pressure and temperature.
Those machines are really hot. You can see there's a safety guard on it. You can see it's a two-part mold, and you can see all the different plates are pushed together. You've got pressure pushing, blowing the molds out. So it comes in from the front there. There you can see the hopper. It comes in from the front. What I'm showing there in the zoom in is the plastic is being pushed through, like almost like the extrusion process. It comes out in a long, thin tube, and then it's like toothpaste, and it's pushed through the machine, and then it's pushed into the mold, and then it sets, and then the machine will blow it out, and then it falls through the machine and a conveyor belt will take it away. When those things come out, they're super duper hot. You can't touch them. I know this because I sat for 5 summers on a machine putting components together every summer for this big order that we used to do for Visi. So I can tell you they're boiling hot. And sometimes things have to be put together really hot to make them actually shrink in and fit together as well. Which is why if something breaks that's plastic, you might not ever be able to get it back together because it's supposed to be stuck together through the heat. So here's one of the plastics that is not well known. It is used. It's sometimes confused with another plastic, and it's called SAN, and it's basically styrene which has been super hardened. It's inexpensive. It creates a gloss or a glassy finish. So do you guys remember those Bic Crystal pens? Okay, that was made out of polystyrene, believe it or not. The crystal part of the barrel was made out of polystyrene, but what was wrong with those pens? Does anyone remember them? They would shatter. Yeah, they would shatter. So polystyrene was really, it shattered a lot. And so also one of the things about it is that's not recyclable at all, which is why it's in that category 7. So Bic has slowly phased out those pens. They no longer make those crystal styrene pens. They will use perhaps AS resin. I can't be 100% sure because no one's giving away their trade secrets. But basically SAN is the better version of polystyrene. So depending on how much information you can get out of manufacturers, they will say that some parts of the pen is made from this material. It is a really cheap material, so you're more likely to see it in really cheap pens. They might say that the pen is made out of a more expensive plastic, but chances are, because it looks so similar to PMMK, it actually might be this, and you won't know until you crack it. And it doesn't crack as easily as styrene, but it's, you know, it can still crack.
Anyone who owns a Twizzler, that's the material.
Not Twisby, but definitely some other brands. At least Twisby don't say it's this, they say it's PMMK. The one that I could find that basically definitely said that they use SAN was Pilot Kakuno, so that's a $15 entry-level fountain pen, but they also use another type of plastic with it. They also have a Be Green range, which basically says that we're going to take some of this material, because SAN can be somewhat recycled, and reuse it. Faber-Castell use SAN in their highlighters. So you know those cheap pastel-y coloured highlighters? So one of the things that SAN can do really well is like pastel colours and jelly colours. It can't do very vivid colours. And some of Platinum's 3776 range is made with AS plastic. Can't confirm exactly which parts or what, but some of it is. It is also likely that some of our cartridge converters are made with AS because it can be blow molded really easily and it's very light. So again, we don't know. They're not going to give up their secrets. So the same issues with any of these modern plastics is that heat really affects them. Solvents, for instance, I'm not sure anyone who's ever cleaned their nails and then decided they were going to write a letter to a friend, watch their favourite pen melt, might have been me. That's a problem. Moulded parts can lead to cracking. Injection moulding has internal stress in it, and it's really hard to remove. And I think one of the things that people don't realise is that when it comes to any kind of moulding, be it blow moulding, injection moulding, you know, any kind of that moulding, you actually need your engineer there constantly testing and measuring and checking. And so that's what my husband does, amongst all the other things that he does, but he has to test every machine on the hour, every hour. So he basically starts at one in the factory, does all the testing to make sure that everything's moulding perfectly, and then begins again. He goes round and round. And because it's such a mundane job, he has to switch with one of the 2 or 3 other engineers that they've got at the factory. That's how much work goes into making sure that the tolerance is correct and everything's being produced at the right level. And if it's not, they fiddle with the machine or they stop the production altogether. Or if someone has not done their job at all, the whole production shuts down, the whole machine's cleaned out, and we have to start all over again, and everything that was produced gets put into the regrind machine, which is not a fun job. And some of the stuff can't be recycled because of the certain colour or whatever that's in it. So speaking of colour, there's some pictures of ASN. I'm going to send around some of the colour that my husband gave me, and he said this is one of their most expensive colours, okay? So I want you to have a guess how much you think what is in that little bag. So that colour is not plastic as such. It is what they call master batch. It's a bunch of pigment that's been added to plastic to make it useful to throw into one of those injection moulding machines so that they can change the colour of the basic white plastic, okay? Because most plastics, and it doesn't matter if it's polypropylene or any of the other plastics, most plastics actually just look like this. Some plastics are spiky and hard, almost like shards, but most of the plastics that we are commonly using look like that. And to colour it, you need to put something very strong in it to colour it. So as that's going around, I'll have you get a think of how expensive you think that is. Just that little bag. Then we have ABS plastics. So again, another styrene type plastic. It's inexpensive again. I think that's the common theme here. Plastics aren't expensive. Again, it was invented in 1950s. And when I say this is modern, that is pretty modern. Like it's not, I'm not trying to be like, oh, well, that's a long time ago, but that is actually the definition of modern plastics. We know ABS is used for tons of things. In our cars, a lot of our stuff is moulded or blow moulded out of ABS in our cars. Why, do you think? It's really strong. Yeah, it's super strong. So that's why it's moulded and used in cars a lot. Also, it's really light. It can actually reduce the car's weight by about 75%. Entire panels of some modern cars are actually made out of ABS, which is worrying, but also that's what it is. But the best thing about ABS is that it's one of those plastics that actually you can mix things into it. And in this case, fiberglass is usually mixed into ABS to make it stronger. You can mix fiberglass into polyprop, but it's not really done as much. You have to be wanting a very specific thing. So you get fiberglass, you can have, it's really accepting of UV stabilizers, and again, why you see it in cars, because obviously you don't want to have a panel on your car that's fading, so it's really accepting of UV stabilizers. Not every plastic is, and we'll talk about a little bit about that as well at the end. It's very accepting of the antioxidants that you can use to stop discoloration and to make it easy to clean, because plastics naturally want to absorb oil. It's a pretty versatile plastic. Now, it might be cheap as an actual plastic, but when you add all these other things into it, the costs really start stacking up. So the end cost of the product is going to be a lot higher than just the plastic that, you know, went into it. And I think people forget that. They see plastic and think, oh, you know, it's just this one thing, but actually it's a lot. Now, I wasn't allowed to bring any UV stabilizer or anything like that because they're toxic, so I couldn't bring those as samples. And he wasn't going to let me show you the bags that it was in because, again, proprietary information. But I can tell you right now that they come in clear, either clear bags or white bags, and they're usually triple wrapped. The UV stabilizer is triple wrapped, and they have all these toxic signs on it and don't touch and this, that, the other. And they're made all around the world. So these stabilizers and things don't all just come from China. And I think that's another problem, that people think plastic comes from China. It actually doesn't. A lot of plastics and a lot of the stabilizers come from Germany. There's a lot that come from Taiwan. No plastic is actually made in Australia. All plastic has to be imported. Whatever we do with it is done here, and then that's it. We don't make raw plastic here. Anymore. Thank you. Yes, we used to with Kodak, but we don't anymore. I think that's really depressing, but it is what it is. I just think that people didn't want to have to deal with all of the regulations that go around it. And having been with my husband for 25 years and basically lived his life, I can tell you there's a lot of regulations around plastic manufacturing in Australia, tons. And then there's all the certifications as well. So every product has to be certified to the Australian standard before it can even go out to sale. And then there's a whole bunch of other legalese around it about what can be used and how it can be used. And so in every single box they pack, there's a letter I wrote 15 years ago that they still use. They're just updated every year, that basically says, this is how you should be using this product. Don't use it any other way, because if you do, you could explode something, because they are making products that go on chemicals and things. What's the problems with oh, this is what I want to say. Kevin is absolutely right with his Lamy collection. So most of Lamy's fountain pens are made with ABS, or a proprietary blend of ABS, which means colours and UV stabilisers and all the other things. And the Lamy feeds are actually injection moulded, which I thought was really interesting. And they're injection moulded ABS as well. They're chemically etched then, which again, another interesting process. And the reason why they're chemically etched is because when you injection mold things, you will get very slight microscopic ridges from the die sets. And to chemically etch something makes it completely smooth. I thought that was really cool. And Kaweco is another big fountain pen manufacturer using ABS plastics, and particularly in their sport model. So the problems with ABS, it's not indestructible, but it's pretty close to being indestructible. It is one of the strongest plastics around, or I think it is one of the strongest plastics around that we use every day. That's not in industry. Lamy's proprietary formula is high performance ABS. So it's not run-of-the-mill plastic. It's kind of like the thing that you would see on a car. And it doesn't degrade easily. If you left it in the sun, it probably wouldn't even discolor much. It would take, like, I think they did an experiment where they left a Lamy pen on the dashboard of a car for an entire year to see how long, and tracked it to see how long it would take to actually discolor. And the top discolored, but the underneath didn't even warp, which I thought was interesting. And again, you leave your car in the sun, you don't want your car to warp either. So if we have an apocalypse, I feel like we can probably hide in Kevin's bunker of Lamy pens, because it's going to be the safest place. I meant that as a joke, but he's not laughing. He's like, my pens.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You've just shown us the colour, which you haven't told us what it's worth yet.
So this is the colour that would be used in ABS plastics as well as polyprop. And who had a guess? Who had a range for this colour? I'll give you a clue. Reds are like the most expensive colour. Red, purple. For this? Yeah. $16. $16.
It's like paint.
Yeah. And the reason why he gave me this is because somebody at his factory accidentally put black into it. So they couldn't use it without picking out every black granule. And even then, you still might get a piece of black dust in there. There is one black, yeah, I know. Yeah. That's why he gave it to me, because the bag is just sitting there and they can't use it. It's like $800 down the drain because the bag was half full. So he wasn't a happy chap that day. But yeah, this solid pink, this is actually, it's going to look that color. If you blend, and you only need a bit, so a handful like that will do about 2 kilos of this stuff. So you need a little bit, and it would make a beautiful solid pink color, which is what you see up there. You see the purple and the whatnot. The interesting thing is that even if some colors are more expensive, they'll even out the cost of all the pens and absorb, you know, the more expensive colors in the colors that aren't as expensive. Yellow and white obviously are the cheapest colors. Like white costs almost nothing and yellow costs almost nothing. Why? Because industry loves those colors and they produce a lot of those colors. Industry does not usually use aqua or purple or pink. They're very specialist application colors. You will see them on something like a fuel cap that's like a bright red, or they might need like a slightly different color to make sure that this particular fuel cap has this particular additive in it. Yes?
So is white a color? Like
Yeah, white is a color.
It's not just the accents of it.
Because if you just made a pen with this, it will come out that color, which is not pure white. It's kind of translucent. Not particularly nice. It's a bit streaky, looks a bit funny. Honestly, you could probably sell it as a special edition because it does look a bit milky. But yeah, white is a color. And it's really fun to put your hand in one of the barrels of those because it feels a bit different to the ABS plastics. I really like cleaning out those drums.
I have a question.
Yes.
So now you've got your plastic,
Yep.
your colour,
Yep.
your UV
Stabilizer.
stabilizer, there's another thing you also mentioned.
Usually it would be an something to reduce oxidization and discoloration.
How's that all mixed in? Is it taken up to the full temperature?
Okay,
and then mixed?
let me go back to, again, I really wish I could show you the other videos I took, but do you see this? Do you see this? Yeah, do you see that hopper?
Yeah.
So basically what happens in here, so that there, I'm just going to pause that so you can see it. That's better. So that massive drum of plastic, can you see there's a bag of colour sitting on the top of that machine? And do you see how at the top there's the vacuum, that with the green thing? Okay, so the colour is actually put, and it's a bit hidden, the colour is actually inserted in the top of that hopper between the vacuum and the actual hopper. And so the colour will mix through. Now, the reason why I was allowed to take a video of this machine is because what they're making is not, you know, anything special, but also the fact that it was in red, which is a nice bright colour. And unfortunately I didn't scan up enough on this photo to see the hopper for the colour, but it will release a certain percentage of colour, and that, I'm not sure you can see it on this, but there's a control panel on these machines, a digital control panel that you can precisely tell the percentage of how much colour to release into how much plastic. And so as it's vacuuming up and filling up the hopper, it's releasing a tiny bit of plastic colour into the actual raw plastic, and then as it injection molds, it's mixing. These are really sophisticated machines. They're about 10 years old. I think this one's 10 years old, but they're still pretty sophisticated. To get an idea, this machine is one of their cheap ones, and it's $500,000. And they have 40 machines, and that's a small one. Their big ones are even more expensive. So the cost of it.
All put into one big vat and
No.
mixed like bread.
A long time ago, the old John's machines from the 50s definitely had to do that. They had a hopper on top, you couldn't put a vacuum to them, that you had to get up there. My husband used to jump up on the machine and mix it by hand, measuring it all out, mix it by hand and pour it in. Yeah, that's why they don't have those machines anymore. Although they still have one John's machines doing rubber, because they're the best machines to do rubber, and they're 80 years old. Sometimes if it just works, you don't change it. Just make sure it's safe to use. We understand how it's mixed? It's pretty complex. Are we getting an idea of why pens are not as cheap as they maybe are? Yeah, okay, good.
Still about it.
All right. Do you want to see that video again, just so that you can see what's going on now that you have a little bit? So can you see the middling hopper there? It goes into there. This is where it heats it up and melts it. There's the control panel where you set up everything. You can see that there's a lot of grease because you need to have those things greased all the time. So my husband comes along and some of the other workers and sprays the machine every hour or so as they're testing everything. You can also see there's a screwdriver there because sometimes you need to adjust something on the fly. Obviously emergency stop button, everything has to be like, you can't even stand near the machine. It's got a big yellow square around it when they're operating because the pressure will crush fingers. You'll lose whatever you put in that machine. So let's finish this off. I really wish you could hear the sound of it because it's like really eerie. It's like
So even though it's machines, it's still quite labour intensive.
Yeah, it's really labour intensive. You need a specialist to actually create those die sets too. Yeah. And in Australia, there's not that many left. And remember, a die set that's longer and deeper is going to have way more complications because you're not just doing the outside, the die set has to mould the inside and the outside together. And that's what's pushing through. And that's why you've got two sets of dies, the inside and the outside, and that's how they move in and out. So the actual complexity of a pen, it's more than you would realise, really. Yeah, don't worry. So I'm not sure if you can see that. That's pushing out the caps there. Try to get a really good view. And there, it takes about 30 seconds for this machine to make a cap. That's what they're making. Yeah. This video is 32 seconds, and I think in 32 seconds... Sorry?
The little red one?
Yeah, the little red caps.
Yeah.
Do you know what they are for? Yeah. No, they're not for Coke. It's, you don't get a sense of the size of this machine. So the caps that came out of it are about, I'm not sure if anyone's got They're about that big, which is what, 5 centimetres by about 5 centimetres. And they're, if you walk into Bunnings, you'll see tons of stuff that my husband's company made, like tons. Like we laugh about it all the time, like, oh my God, look what they're selling that for. How do they get away with that? Because we don't understand. But there you can see the feed. That's a more modern feed. The other one I took a photo of was older. Again, can you see that box up there? That's the temperature. That's got to be washed. If it's too hot, plastic just oozes out everywhere. If it's not hot enough, the whole machine gets backed up, and that's very expensive to fix. Oop, I've gone too far. All right, PMMA. That is the one that most of our pens are made out of. It's basically lucite, and we might have heard the term precious resin, which is what Mont Blanc uses. I'm looking straight at you, is what Mont Blanc, but actually it's just a direct translation from German, and for somehow it's, you know, they've decided that that's the word that they're going to use. PMMA is an amorphous plastic. So what's different about PMMA to some of the others? Amorphous means that its chemical structure isn't a long chain. It's more like a bowl of spaghetti, which means that it has a lot of space between its molecular structure, which makes it more transparent. And also that transparency leads to something that's kind of like, almost like crystal clear, which is, you know, why we have such crystal clear pens. It has, because of that bowl of spaghetti structure, it has strong stability, dimensional stability. It has, I would like to say, exceptional transparency, because you can't get the kind of transparency that PMMA gives in AS. AS is pretty clear, but PMMA can be like glass-like. It's the kind of things that our glasses are actually made out of. And obviously, you know, that's pretty important for it to be crystal clear. It doesn't shrink, warp, distort very easily. It doesn't break down easily. It holds a thread, which is really important, and it also doesn't wear out. So if you've had, like my whole glasses are PMMA, so if you have glasses and you've ever noticed that this is loose, yep. So if it's not a metal hinge and it's actually the plastic's wearing away. And cheaper glasses are made with cheaper plastics. That's really the end of it there. If you've noticed that your glasses are scratching a lot, they've probably put a coating that's weakened the lens. And I had a pair of glasses that did that, and it was really frustrating. So PMMA has a glass-like feeling. It can be highly polished. I know that you spoke about your polishing technique. The same polishing technique is used on PMMA with those really microfiber diamond sort of, not diamond, but really micro mesh, is that what it is? Yeah, they use micro mesh on it to get that really beautiful smoothness to it. We know it as plexiglass, so we know it's strong. PMMA is also used as a thread, and it's used inside, I want to say, I think it's part of the, like I know bulletproof vests are made with Kevlar and a few other products, but also PMMA is in there as well. I don't know how it is, but it is. It could be the plastic, the plates inside. I'm not 100% sure, but I read it and I forgot to put it in. We mostly see PMMA pens like that. So Mont Blanc categorically states they use a proprietary blend of PMMA, and what they mean by proprietary is that it's probably got a UV stabilizer, it's probably got some other thing in it, the base of it is probably PMMA, but there's other things in it to strengthen it or toughen it or to give it some sort of shine. And this would be something that they've engineered and probably took a long time to figure out how to do it too. Engineers are not cheap, and you have to test and test and test and test until you get a blend that will be molded, because they injection mold their pens, molded through a machine and come out clean and smooth without needing cleaning up. So one of the things that we also don't realize is that when you when you injection mold pens, or blow mold, but when you injection mold pens, sometimes they don't come out clean and they've got to be cut down or polished up. And we call that excess plastic flash. Sailor and Pilot also use PMMA, and they're like, Sailor are really like, we use PMMA, we don't care, we're just going to tell everyone. They're really open with the fact that they use PMMA, knowing that nobody can copy one of their pens just using PMMA, because they probably also have a proprietary blend. Pilot are a bit more like, we're not going to tell you, but we do use it. And they use it probably in the 823, I would say. From everything I read, it seems like pilots specifically use PMMA in the 823, which I believe you have one today. And it's because it has glass-like translucency. And do you have any of your Mont Blancs here? No, you don't have any. I didn't bring mine either. Most of your pens are probably PMMA, and if they're not PMMA, they're probably an epoxy resin. What is an epoxy resin? You were the man. If you were here last time, he spoke at length about his process and how he uses epoxy resin to stabilize wood and to actually get some really beautiful colors and marbling. I have a really cool pen that is epoxy resin, and that's the one there if you want to pass that around. Yep, that one. I've only got one. Thank you. I am very girlish, even though I don't look it today. So it's a high-strength thermoplastic, and it's comprised of a part A and a part B, and I won't get into the actual complexities of that because I'm not a chemist. And basically, part A is inert, okay? You can add color to it, you can work with it as long as you want. It's the plastic, okay? When you add part B, that's the hardener. And depending on the type of resin you've got, determines how quickly it's going to harden. So you'd probably use it as epoxy, two-part epoxy. I'm willing to bet everyone's used two-part epoxy at some point. Diamond hard coat, so stuff that polishes floors is basically resin. My parents, when I was a kid, my parents bought this house that had a slate floor. Has anyone ever had a slate floor before? So a slate floor has to be coated in resin pretty much every 5 to 10 years. Do you know how much a pain in the butt that is? And my parents decided that they were going to do it themselves and not pay a contractor. That was 4 days of fun for my sister and I, helping them resin the floor. So a bit traumatized by resin. That's why I only have one resin pen. Trust me, when you're 10 years old resining a floor, it's like the least fun you could possibly have. But they look really good because you can do a lot of things with resin. You can put a lot of additives in it, pine cones, wood, glitter, spangles, tons of stuff. It can be colored, it can be solid, it can be translucent, you can pearlize it, you can do whatever you want with it. It is so cool. And then when it hardens, it's hard, and artists can take it and put it on a lathe and really style it out. So we've got Benu, which is the pen that's going around. We've got Mont Blanc, and then we've got bespoke pen makers like Pete's, and he did the Melbourne Pen and Stationery Show door prize, which was a resin pen, and it had multiple layers of resin, and it was beautiful. Like, he did a really good job. I love that pen. Too bad we couldn't keep it, eh?
It's actually a poly resin.
That's a cool resin. I use a UV resin on it as well.
The pen blank makers use epoxy.
Yep.
But for label casting, I use a poly,
That's pretty cool.
which polishes up.
It does. It polished up so shiny. I was like really surprised. That particular pen had holographic plastic fibers through it, and it had paint, and it had other colorants, and you could like almost see right. It was dimensional. You could see through it. It was really cool. The problems with epoxy resins. They do come these days with strong UV stabilizers, but some of the stuff that you buy really cheap out of hobby shops don't have any UV stabilizer, and they can yellow quite strongly. I would assume that most pen makers are putting a UV stabilizer in or buying the raw product with a UV stabilizer. There's a really good, if you're interested in playing with resin, there's Barnes in Australia that has its own proprietary brand of resin, part A and B, and that's a really nice resin to play with. So, other problems, sometimes resin can crack if it's not pressure set. You might have seen resins being set into pots, pressure pots, and all the bubbles rise to the top. You definitely want all the bubbles out, because if you have bubbles in it, you can lead to cracking. Same with glass. And there's a picture of resin in a box, and there's a lovely Benu pen showing a slightly different design made out of resin. Delrin. Now this was one I came across that I had never heard before, but I thought it was so interesting that I had to talk about it. It's an engineered thermoplastic based out of acetal, so it's got similar properties to some of the other plastics we've talked about. it is an interesting, I'll just give you a look at the pens. It's a really interesting plastic. Now, it cannot do clear. It can only, at this point in time, do black and white. You can colour it, but it can't be coloured with the traditional master batch. Doesn't take. It is a really interesting resin. It's like plastic. I wouldn't say it's resin, it's plastic. So basically, it's shatter resistant, it's stain resistant, it resists wear and tear. It's really, really, really strong. The problem with it is that it comes in a beautiful white and a beautiful black, and maybe we can get a red, but that's pretty hard to do, so you're kind of limited. The other part of it is that it's super slick. So pen makers have designed ridges, micro ridges in the pen, a bit like your pens actually, to stop it from slipping out of someone's hand. And because it's slick, it's really hard to embed a cap in there. Yeah, you can't glue it. It's a really tricky plastic. But obviously people want to play with it, and so these three particular pen makers gave it a go. Conid Pen Co, very early adopter, don't make pens at all. It's kind of like, this traumatized us so much, we're not making pens anymore. Their website's still active, but they will not take orders, and they are not making pens. I don't really know what's happened with them, but their pens were super popular. And then Gravitas does one. They do the little mini ones, and I think they're pretty cool. I've got a picture of them over there. And Tactile Turn make one as well. Now, I've got two pictures of the Gravitas ones, and I've got one of the, I think that is not, I'm pretty sure, yeah, that one up the top is a Conid, and it's only the cap and the top there. They're cool, but you can see it's kind of like milky. It kind of looks also, the black is very dense, but it's super slick. The red is actually a rubber band. It's not actually a red plastic. It's cool, it's interesting if you like an interesting pen.
But it's dimensionally perfect when you try to machine it.
Yep.
So you get very accurate dimensional fits. So hence the cap and the back bit are bits that have been machined or screwed together.
Yep.
And it's impact resistant, and it's resistant to all sorts of chemicals. So it's a fantastic material.
Yes.
And not fantastic for all the parts of the pen.
I think it's mostly used in medical products.
And mechanical,
Yeah.
high-end mechanical equipment.
Yeah.
And it's temperature stable as well.
Yeah, it's a cool material, and when I was researching, I'm like, I have to talk about it, even though I don't know anything about it, because it's so interesting. And someone obviously gave it a go, and one company was traumatized, but the other two are still going.
So ink doesn't stain?
Doesn't stain, resists everything. Plastics for 3D printing. This is you. So there's two types of 3D printing. There's resin printers and filament printers, and it's not a very common method of creating fountain pens, but it's a beautiful artistic method. It is, you know what, do you mind if I defer to you? Because I feel like you are the expert, and maybe we can get you up for a talk one day again.
Sure. What do you want me to tell you about?
Just tell a little bit about your process and maybe show one of your pens, because they're pretty damn cool.
So there's no issues. There's two main hobbyist 3D printing technologies, and the first one's the SLA up the top, where you have a light setting acrylic type resin, and the other one is where you have a roll of plastic spaghetti and you extrude it with heat through a small nozzle, and that's called FDM printing. That's the type I do. I don't do the resin one, the SLA, because you have to use solvents and stuff, and I'm too messy and it's too stinky, and even though you can get great resolution, there's not a lot of choice of colours and sort of sparkles and the things. I use mostly polylactic acid, which is the first filament type that Desi's got up there, and I use that because it prints very easily compared to some of the others like nylon or ABS or PMMA. You can get all sorts of thermo-softening plastics as filament, but most of them are too hard to work with. And polylactic acid's very popular, and so it comes in more colours than inks come in. It comes with sparkles, it comes with texture, it comes with carbon fibre, it comes plain, it comes transparent, it comes opaque. So there's huge range of possibilities that you can get with just the polylactic acid.
One of your pens actually has the sparkle in it. I thought that was really cool because it's really subtle and you don't actually notice it until you flip it into the light. So this sparkle's really ostentatious, and I like more of a subtle sparkle.
Known for their subtlety.
Yeah. When you buy a pen online, it really, you don't really get what you see, and that's a bit too much for me. But I keep it in my collection as a reminder of double checking everything before I buy it online.
The big downside with polylactic acid, PLA, is it tends to be brittle unless it's got additives that change that property, and it's almost always temperature sensitive. So if you leave one of my pens in your car over summer, I'm happy to sell you another one.
It will delaminate, basically. It will just fall apart and melt.
Fall apart.
Yeah.
The brittleness is relatively easily overcome by gluing together multiple layers of the plastic. So my pens are made mostly of polylactic acid and epoxy.
Yep. Thank you. See, I knew we had experts here. I didn't have to do all the talking. The background image is actually from Michael's website, and it's a picture of his pen. I didn't want to put too many of his pictures up because it is his website. Like I said, if you download this presentation, all the links are in the bottom. Last thing that I'm going to talk about is finally polypropylene, and it's mostly used for this kind of pen, which is recycled pens made by very small makers. I've got a link in this video, in this presentation, that will actually take you to a YouTube clip of a Melbourne pen maker who shows you the whole process. It's about a 5-minute video. And what they do is they get plastics from wherever, they sort them, and they sort them into size, color, grade, and then they have the most adorable hand crank injection molding machine that I've ever seen. It would be very labor intensive to build up enough force to crank it through, but they've got a very simple mold, and it's this mold here that you can feed basically a Bic blank into. And it's really cute. And there's another company in Sydney called Banish, but Precious Plastic in Melbourne. Now, these guys used to come around to my husband's factory and say, hey, do you have anything sort of left over? And my husband's like, probably not what you're looking for, because it's all mixed up, because basically what they do is if a batch of caps fail, they grind them all up and turn it into black, because they only need like a tiny bit of black to make black when you've got all the other colours mixed in together. But those caps are actually unstable. And one of the things I didn't mention is that whenever you add plastics, like stabilizers and things, to actual raw plastic, like UV stabilizer, colour, you actually are introducing a problem that could happen. And cracking is the big one, particularly with colour. So one of the reasons that they don't use pink a lot in industry is because it cracks. And in some industries, you can't have that because that particular thing is obviously guarding the top of a chemical drum, or it's on a fuel tank or something that needs it to not corrode. And so one of the things that I haven't mentioned about plastics is that every time they try to reformulate something or do a new color, a huge amount of testing has to go into it, which is why you'll see companies that do resin pens pumping out different designs, because it's easy. You can add color. But when you've got traditional pen makers using PMMA or like injection molding plastics, pen colors, they require a lot of testing, up to a year. And all of that is wages and money and labor. And this is why, a cheap plastic pen is not always a cheap plastic pen. Thank you.